Welcome to our lecture series for the Human-Centered Design Bootcamp. In this video, we will be focusing on the prototype phase. One of the best ways to gain insights in a human-centered design process is to carry out some form of prototyping. But what is prototyping? Prototyping means making your idea come to life so you can learn from it, quickly iterate, and evolve your idea to greatest value. It's building a model of what you think your concept should look like or feel like and getting feedback to improve or even abandon your idea. Now that you have generated solutions based on your design research and synthesis, it is time to surface the assumptions you might be making about why your solution might solve your stakeholders' problem. Prototyping is an extremely valuable step of the human-centered design process. Putting the user at the heart of the process requires you to test your designs on real users, and prototypes make this possible without spending loads of time and money. In this phase, you will create low investment, quick experiments, which we call prototypes, to test those assumptions and advance your ideas. So, what is prototyping all about? Prototyping is all about making your ideas tangible. Prototyping is a simple, cheap, and fast way to represent and shape ideas so others can experience and interact with your idea. In the prototyping phase, you will explore and create tangible representations of your ideas, models built quickly and cheaply, intended to be shared with others, used to test and validate or even invalidate your proposed solutions. Think of prototyping as continuation of ideation and a tool for re-engaging your users. In the last phase of the design process, ideate, we adopted a divergent thinking mode. This is when we generated a number of possible solutions from which you selected one that you are going to prototype. Now it's time to move back to convergence. During the prototyping phase, we identify and test assumptions about our solution in order to learn what works and what doesn't so we can improve our solution. The goal of this phase is to get your design team aligned around what assumptions you are making about your solution so we can design low resolution prototypes, which are low time investment, low cost, and small scale. At the end of this phase, your team should be clear on how you are going to conduct a prototype to test an assumption embedded in the team's solution. So, this is the moment to ask ourselves, what steps can we take to bring our idea to life in order to gather early feedback from users on our solution? But before we do so, let's learn what is a prototype. A prototype is a tangible, testable representation of your idea. It's usually a low risk, low investment, low resolution way to learn more about your idea. And also, prototyping is an attitude and a mindset. In this picture, you can see one of the prototypes the team built in one of our workshops in India when we were trying to solve issues around nutrition. So, rapid prototyping is about making your ideas tangible and enabling others to interact with your idea. A prototype is really anything that helps you communicate or test an experience with other people in order to get feedback. And the whole point of prototyping is to quickly make something simple and low cost that will allow us to get closer to knowing what will work, what won't, and why. Prototyping is this act of making a concept real, whether it's a sketch or a napkin, a cardboard artifact, or a role play of a service. Where there is uncertainty around a new solution, prototyping enables your team to remove risks by testing your assumptions early and iterating on your solution. I love this quote from David Kelly, the founder of IDEO and the Stanford D School. A prototype is just your idea of what the future might look like. So, in a way, our prototype is a solution from the future that we are trying to bring to the present so people can interact with it and give us feedback so we can rapidly improve on it. One of the questions you might be asking yourselves is, but why do we prototype? Well, there are different reasons to prototype. One reason is prototyping to develop one idea. Prototyping builds your understanding of what the concept really means. How does it look and feel? How does it work? How will people interact with it? All these questions get answered when we use prototyping to develop one idea. We can also use prototyping to communicate. Prototyping expresses your concept in a tangible form. Your users will be able to give you more constructive feedback if they can see, touch, feel, and experience your concept instead of just hearing you explaining it. And finally, prototyping to test. Prototyping brings your concept in front of those who you are designing for so that you will yield the most direct feedback and uncover insights. The fundamental way you test your prototypes is by letting users experience them and react to them. In creating prototypes to test with users, you have the opportunity to examine your solution decisions as well as test your perception of your users and their needs. Prototyping also creates alignment. Sometimes our projects suffer from lack of alignment. Our concepts or proposals are presented, written in a very ambiguous way that leave room to adapt at a later stage. And that can create discrepancies in how different stakeholders perceive the project. And this cartoon tries to illustrate that. On the left, maybe that's how the community explained it. But then the team understood it a bit differently. And when it came to the team who designed it, well, became more different. But what was really implemented was something far away from what the community explained us. And what the community actually really needed was also something different because sometimes we can't articulate so well what our needs are. And then we have at the very end, the right end of the diagram, how the comms teams wrote about it. So you can see here the difference between the perception of different stakeholders, whether it's community, the design team, the implementation team, or comms. I want to show you a very concrete example. This is a project with Sesame Workshop to develop Elmo's Monster Maker, an iPhone app that leads young children through the process of designing their own monster friend. They had an idea for a new dance feature in which kids could guide Elmo through different dance moves in sync with a simple music track. So, with this Monster Maker app, an IDEO team wanted to work out an engaging experience without investing heavily in programming. So, they made a digital prototype out of paper, cardboard, people, and a video recording. So, let's have a look.
Cue music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in and I touch the monster, and he gives me a special dance move. I go and touch again, and he does a different one. And it can go for as long as I want. It has a few signature moves. And when I've had enough and I'm done dancing, I push the back button and pauses and the music stops. Monster Maker.
Cool.
Sonic. Come on, Sonic.
Wow.
Get in there, Sonic.
Through this example, you can see with a little bit of creativity and some paper, cardboard, and ingenuity, we can create great prototypes that help us develop, communicate, or test our idea. In a nutshell, prototyping, it's all about making a tangible version of your idea, testing it with users, and then collecting feedback that will help you to learn more about the problem and the solution you developed. You will then integrate that learning into the next iteration of your solution. Increasingly, you hear the language of both piloting and prototyping in development. So, which one should we be focusing on prototyping or piloting? So let's learn what's the difference between a pilot and a prototype. And although both are methods for experimenting, my observation is that in the development sector, pilots are viewed much more of a phase one rollout activity than pure experimentation. In the development context, piloting typically happens as a live activity and is often considered the first phase of program launch. Prototyping happens at different levels. For example, when you are exploring the very early stages of a concept, you are likely to develop prototypes behind closed doors. Once you are more confident of what your concept is, but there is still uncertainty around various aspects, you may choose to go live and put it out into the world of real users. So, prototyping is really about exploring these early stages of a concept. It's used when you have a hypothesis about the answer, and the expectation is for our solution to fail. We are not expecting during the prototyping stage to succeed. A prototype is usually measured by how much you learned and what it informed. And it's best for learning if your concept fulfills a need. It's good for evolving your concept from low resolution to high resolution. And it's a great tool for engaging your stakeholders. So let's now move into pilot. Pilot is used when you believe you know the answer. Usually it's the first phase of a service or an intervention launched. Also, the expectation in our pilot is not for our solution to fail, it's actually for our solution to succeed because we previously been through several rounds of prototyping, which would give us some level of confidence that we are going to succeed. So a pilot is measured as a success or a failure. And it's best for observing behaviors around the actual situation and preparing to scale the solution to the entire population. So let's look at some prototyping tips. Just start building and learn through making. Human-centered design has a bias towards action. That means if you have any uncertainties about what you are trying to achieve, your best bet is to just make something. Creating a prototype will help you to think about your idea in a concrete manner and potentially allow you to gain insights into ways that you can improve your idea. And build only enough to test your idea. There is no need to spend too much time. Prototyping is all about speed. The longer you spend building your prototype, the more emotionally attached you get with your idea, thus hampering your ability to objectively judge its merits. And remember what you are testing for. All prototypes should have a central testing issue. Do not lose sight of that issue, but at the same time, Do not get so bound to it as to lose sight of other lessons you could learn from. And create immersive experiences through role playing. The role play is intended to give the attending participants a realistic insight into the user experience with the prototype of a product or a service. Also, keep it simple and scrappy to start. When you are excited about a brand new idea, it's easy to get carried away with lots of details. A good prototype, however, starts out very simple and rough. Focus on a narrow piece of your idea at the beginning so that you are building to answer specific questions about the concept and experience. As you go, you'll continue to evolve and refine the level of detail needed to most constructively convey your idea and elicit useful feedback. And don't get too attached to your idea. It's easy to get attached to your solution, especially as you get further along in prototyping. After all, you and your team are likely putting in more than just time and resources. It may very well be your heart and creativity on the line. However, if you aren't willing to let go of your initial solution as the one right solution, you are at risk of missing out on exploring variations that might lead to surprising and potentially better ideas. And gather feedback from stakeholders and end users. Feedback is a gift that allows you to learn and move forward with your idea. Thank your critics. They will help you to get to better solutions. And finally, fail early to succeed sooner. Getting tangible and asking for early feedback allows you to make inexpensive mistakes rather than finding out that something isn't working too far down the road. And to illustrate that, I brought this diagram on when to prototype. Because the sooner we fail and the faster we learn, the greater the chances are for success. It's cheaper to fail early in order to validate things that work and things that don't. If you test too late and therefore learn too late that your solution is not going to work, you might have lost significant amount of time and resources. In the early stages of prototyping, you should fail a lot, and that's great. That's absolutely okay. And it's okay because we learn a ton in the process and minimize the risk of failure in the long run. In the end, we want to tackle real user needs with empathy in an innovative way. Prototyping can be undertaken at different levels of resolution and serve different purposes. Think about what you are trying to learn with your prototypes and create low resolution objects and scenarios which probe those questions. Staying low resolution allows you to pursue many different ideas you generated without committing to a direction too early on. The objective is not simply to create a mock-up or scale model of your solution concept. It is to create experiences to which users can react. Bring resolution to the aspects that are most important for what you are trying to test and save your efforts on other aspects. In this picture, we can see how this prototype evolved from just a yellow post-it with a drawing to something more tangible, more concrete, more advanced and developed. As we start to get feedback from our users and we start to gain confidence that we are getting in the right direction, that's when we start to move the resolution of our prototypes from low resolution to high resolution. Prototype to test assumptions, not solutions. So, what assumptions are you making in your own solutions? In other words, what needs to be true about your users' feelings and motivations for your solution to be successful? Or what do you want to learn about people through your prototypes? Once you identify those, you can create prototypes to test those assumptions or questions. For example, this is a mock-up of a clothing exchange app. One assumption we had when we built this solution was that people would be willing to exchange the clothes they didn't use for 90 days in a row. When we tested the prototype, we learned that that was too short of a time for someone to be willing to give out or exchange that piece of cloth. Along with that, we also learned many more interesting insights that led us to fully rethink our solution. So, as you prototype, ask yourselves, what are you trying to learn more about? Steer towards prototypes that will yield feedback about the most important underlying assumptions. And stay focused on testing questions, not just making a cool mock-up. So let's look at some types of prototypes. Prototypes can come in different shapes and forms. They can be physical, they can be digital, we can prototypes environments or spaces, and even services, along with many, many more. So let's look at each of these in more detail. Physical prototypes test how people interact with tangible objects or products. Physical prototypes may focus on testing the function of an object or its form, or in further evolved iterations, maybe both. This is an example, again from India, where we were testing how this concept of a scale that would provide you very meaningful data about your nutrition level, how that would resonate with a particular type of user. You can also prototype services. Service prototyping explores the underlying roles, processes, and tools of an experience. Some services involve more person-to-person interactions, while others leverage more digital or remote interactions. In this example, when designing a clean drinking water solution in Kenya, the IDEO.org design team wanted to test potential service delivery mechanisms, including a door-to-door model, a pop-up kiosk model, and a brick-and-mortar store. By creating very quickly a name, Smart Life, and a logo, which they could put on signs and t-shirts, renting a kiosk and storefront for a day, the design team was able to simulate these three types of in-person service delivery models and test how these interactions might work with potential customers. The picture on the left, you see the testing of one potential service model. The team have set up an informal shop front and created a logo to test demand for smart life offerings. The picture on the right, you see the final smart life service that integrates both a brick and mortar location along with the subscription delivery option. Here you see the design team prototyping a clean drinking water service in Kenya, receiving feedback and learning about the real conditions. And they did that by renting out a shop front and testing whether or not customers would buy their product. Another way of prototyping is through digital prototypes. Digital prototypes test how people interact with technology-based solutions. We like to start making digital prototypes using simple analog objects like paper, cardboard, and tape. Only after we learn what information and interactions prove most useful do we move on to actually building out digital experiences. Paper prototypes allow the teams to simply and quickly try different ways to present information to participants and empower community to help co-create a solution with the design team without needing deep technical skills. Here's another picture of how a team put together very quickly, just using Post-its, a complete mobile app showing the participant what would be the different ways in which they could interact with the app and the different functionalities that could be made available. We can also prototype spaces and environments. Prototyping a space simulates the experience of being in and interacting with the surrounding environment, like a building or outdoor space. Prototyping a space allows you to think big. You may even think of space as a large product or tool, one in which you live, work, or conduct other activities. Early versions of environment prototypes may involve inexpensively transforming the area by using things that are already at your fingertips, such as tables, chairs, cardboard, or wood. Here we can see a prototype that different teams of students submitted on how they could transform their classroom into more creative environments. This is another example which tried to answer the question, how might we reinvent the pharmacy experience? So in this example, the team decided to build a real mock-up, one-to-one scale, and then bring people into experimenting what it would look like to be in this new space that would feel very real. So let's look at 6 common ways to prototype. We can prototype through sketches and diagrams. Any sketch, even the absolute messiest, can create a wonderful low-fidelity prototype. Sketching diagrams, mind maps, or the structure of our ideas can really help others to get a well-rounded idea of what you aim to achieve. With sketching, you can draw out the various touch points that affects a user's journey, and you can also detail what processes happen when, the different touch points, and all the other details of the solution. And anyone can sketch out an idea, and it's a great way to run through the initial stages. As these prototypes are disposable, you can really narrow down so much without spending too much energy or time. Another way is through paper interfaces. Paper interfaces are made using multiple sheets of paper and sketching movable elements and interactive features on different sheets to create a more in-depth look. Digital products like mobile apps, websites, and screen-based products often require a quantity of prototypes in the run-up to the final design. Paper interfaces are handy in the beginning as they are incredibly malleable. With paper interfaces, you can replace different sheets of paper, sketch over previous ideas, or cut out elements and move them around the prototype. Let's talk storyboards. Everyone loves a story, and storyboarding is a great way of guiding people through a user experience journey. Storyboarding is a technique derived from the film industry and allows you a quick and cheap way of walking stakeholders and users through a product. While it's great to be able to understand the user's journey, storyboarding isn't great for fine-tuning the details of solutions, as they tend to be broader in nature and focus less on the smaller details. Another common way to prototype is through Lego. So now I know what you're thinking. And yes, it's great news. Legos is for adults too. I don't know about you, but I love playing with Lego. Using Lego can be incredibly helpful in creating a prototype. It's versatile and able to spark imagination. It's easy, cheap, and can be put together and taken apart in no time at all. You can use Lego to simulate a user's journey all the way through to creating rough prototypes of products or services. Prototyping through role playing is extremely powerful. Role playing can take many forms, but the best is when you simulate the physical environment of the user. You can use props, use audio simulations such as music, and use objects around your workplace to bring more realism into the scene. And finally, physical models. Physical models can be made out of a wide range of materials, such as paper, cardboard, clay, or foam, and can have a range of sizes. The purpose of the physical model is to go a step further than a sketch and bring the two-dimensional into the three-dimensional. This brings all the detail forward and brings a sense of realness. This allows for much stronger user testing as it can spark discussion about the form factor of the solution. At the early stages of solution development, design teams should focus on iterating quickly, testing assumptions and features with the least amount of time and money invested. Some basic prototyping tools and methods are very handy and can be cost effective using low cost materials as much as possible. Some examples are Post-its of different sizes and colors, cardboard, colorful tapes, construction paper, cutter and scissors, aluminum foil, rubber band, paper clips, lollipop wooden sticks, or colorful thread and Velcro. So these are some of the materials that you can easily find in your office or at home that you can use to develop easy, low cost, quick prototypes. Now, let's look at some tools and methods we will be using during the prototype phase. There are essentially four tools that we will be using: building blocks, storyboard, prioritizing assumptions, and design a prototype. The tools in the prototype phase are designed to help your team construct representations of your solutions. These representations are intended to elicit feedback, answer specific questions about a concept, and test assumptions embedded in your ideas. As usual, you can refer to the guidebook for more depth and guidance. You will also find instructions on how to use each of the tools, a case study, some facilitation tips, and some reflection tools and rubrics to help you self-assess your own progress. So let's move into building blocks. Building blocks helps you to develop your concept more fully by adding specific details. Building blocks is a tool designed to help your team identify all the elements of your idea that needs to be developed. In reality, your concept is more complex than a single post-it. So use this tool to help you develop your concept more fully by adding specific details. So now that you've finished your ideation, you have your big idea coming from the brainstorm, it's time to expand upon it. In this tool, you will find 10 categories to help you think about the variety of elements that will make up your solution. And be specific and add detail, but also note that you don't need to use every box in this tool. If there are some that are irrelevant, please disregard them. And after you expanded the idea, reflect on the assumptions you made in your planning about why the solution is going to solve the problem. So let's look at each of these boxes with a specific example. In this example, we were looking at how to support the parent coach and give them a playbook for guiding their students' learning. So the whole idea is about having a playbook so that the parent could become a coach. What we did by using this tool was to reflect, are there any events that we could add to the solution that would make sense? Well, the team discussed and we found out that Having an online conference organize the content in the playbook would be helpful. Also, we discussed about rituals, that each lesson has a reflection ritual for the start and finish of the event. Also, we thought about spaces. Are there spaces that could be created for this idea? What about policies? What new forms of communication will need to take place? And around communication, the team decided that social media would be very important to get the message out. We also looked at objects, products, or tools that could enhance our idea. So we discussed about the playbook, having a website, digital platforms, YouTube channels, and forms. We also discussed about services, what new services, programs, or interventions would need to be created to make this idea successful. What about new roles? What about trainings? And are there some other considerations? Towards the end, the team also spent a few minutes to discuss some of the assumptions. So here are some examples of assumptions that we are interested to explore. What formats are going to be most accessible to different populations? Do caregivers have capacity in terms of time, capability to use the playbook? If we provide resources to caregivers, will students' learning outcomes actually improve? Will caregivers understand the playbook? What types of resources and advice will be most helpful? What kinds of coaching around the resources are necessary? So these are some of the questions we came up with, which we are going to explore in further stages of the prototyping phase. The next tool we will be using is storyboards. Storyboards help you think through your idea in terms of a timeline. So now that your design team has selected an idea to prototype, it's very important to think through the details of your concept by breaking your idea into smaller moments in the experience. And a great way to do this is by creating a storyboard that shows how a user might interact with your idea over time. You may already be familiar with the concept of storyboards from film or animation or even comic books. Storyboards always communicate a story through images. So what are storyboards for? Well, storyboards helps us to understand the user journey. It maps the user journey and it describes the user and the solution behavior in more detail. It breaks your idea into smaller moments in the experience so we can better understand what happens in those moments. And it shows the user progression and interaction. How does the user progresses in our service or interacts with our product? It is also a great tool for communication that allows us to explain the various details of the solution, and it demonstrates the workflow in a very quick and visually enhanced way. So let's look at one example. This example is from a service called Best Latrine, your pay-per-use toilet. And in this example, the person that we are trying to picture is Josephine. She's 20 years old, 28 years old. She's a tailor, and she's also a mother of two children. And the storyboard starts with the phase of awareness. So Josephine hears about a new service on the radio called Best Latrine. The service sounds unique because it allows cardholders to pay for visits to the toilet in advance. Sounds interesting. Let's learn more. Then we move into initial purchase. She notices that Best Latrine prepaid cards are being sold at a nearby kiosk in her neighborhood, and she buys one. There is enough value on the card to last her family for 1 month. And then we move into first use. On her first visit to the latrine, Josephine inserts her Best Latrine card into the slot and the door unlocks. Inside, the toilet is clean and comfortable. Now moving to full adoption. Josephine gives both her children a prepaid card so they can use the bathroom on their own when they need to. Then the refill. Happy after a month, she signs up to transfer money via M-Pesa, a service that allows her to send money from her cell phone to her Best Latrine account. And finally, the loyalty. Each time the Josephine refers a neighbor to Best Latrine, she is rewarded with an incentive of some kind, such as a free single use at the Best Latrine toilet. So, as you can see from this example, a storyboard makes it very easy for the team and other people to understand how our service is going to work. So, in a way, it's not only a great tool to develop an idea and discuss with your team all the necessary details, but it's also a great tool to communicate to others what we are trying to do and achieve. So, here are some storyboarding tips. You don't need to create images for all the little details of your story or your solution. Create only images that moves the story forward. Most of the time, 3, 4, 5 stages is more than enough. Just highlight the parts that are essential to the story and focus on the service elements you want feedback on. Maybe there is part of the solution that is not so innovative that you might know how you are going to go about it, but maybe there are parts of the solution that have more unknowns. That's where you want to focus on because that's the area in which you are looking for receiving feedback on. And figure out what you want to learn and make sure it shows up in your narrative. And finally, use super low fidelity sketches with words underneath to begin with. These are two examples of storyboards we have created in previous workshops. As you can see, they are quite simple to understand. Storyboard Your Idea is a tool to help you think through your idea in terms of a timeline. What happens at the beginning, the middle, and at the end? By thinking through your idea in terms of a timeline, you'll be able to further reflect on the assumptions you are making and generate new assumptions as well. So you should draw a storyboard that maps out the experience you are hoping to create for your stakeholder. Step into your stakeholder's shoes and imagine what they will experience at every step of the engagement. Think about the experiences you are hoping to create, whether your idea is a program or a service or a product. And again, please note that you don't need to use every box. If there are some that are irrelevant, please disregard. And then take the assumptions you generated in the last exercise and match them to the phase of the experience that is most relevant. And you can generate new assumptions as well. Here is another storyboard that you can find in the guidebook. I'm not going to walk you through the details of this storyboard. I just want to highlight that usually, along with each picture, we also use the bottom part of our storyboard to capture possible assumptions. In this example, which is again about the playbook, we have some assumptions embedded in each frame. At this stage, where caregivers are learning about how to access the playbook and what it is, our assumptions is that caregivers are looking to the resources and the marketing of the resource will work and the caregiver will find the resource. Well, these assumptions might not be correct. Maybe these represent opportunities for us to build some experiments. And we would do that in the same way for all the other phases or stages of our storyboard. Let's look at another concept that is quite important during the prototyping phase, the concept of assumptions, which means what must be true for our idea to work. We use generally prototyping to facilitate a discussion between us and our users. In these conversations, focus on testing a set of assumptions as we continue to evolve our solution. Think about what must be true for your idea to work. What can you create to test assumptions about the problem or need and your solution or strategy? So, prioritizing assumptions is a tool designed to help your team prioritize the assumptions you identified during the building blocks and storyboard your idea tools in order to select which assumptions you plan to test first. As you develop your idea, you will be inherently making assumptions about your stakeholders. Your team needs to test those assumptions early before expending a lot of resources on an idea that might fail. By prioritizing your assumptions, your team will be determining which assumptions to design your prototypes around. So, first, reflect on the assumptions your team generated during the building blocks and storyboard your idea activities. And using this tool, categorize your assumptions. And finally, prioritize the assumption your team needs to test in the first round of prototypes, the second round, and the third round of testing. So let's look at one example. In this example, which refers to the guidebook and the playbook idea, we have divided all our assumptions into three categories: assumptions about impact, assumptions about function, and assumptions about form. Let me read some of these to you. Assumptions about impact. For example, we believe that caregivers will have more confidence from having this playbook, or that students will better achieve their learning objectives. These are some assumptions about impact. About function, well, we believe the playbook should be and will be free and will be accessible to its target audience. And the playbook will also be continuously updated. These are assumptions about function. Finally, we have assumptions about form. We might say that the playbook will have a team and a community that can support it, for example. So that's the first stage of the exercise. The second stage is to remix these assumptions into what is more important to test early in the process. So, in the first round of prototyping, what are the assumptions about impact that we want to test, or assumptions about function, or assumptions about form? In this instance, we are saying that what is critical to test in the early stages is an assumption around the caregivers will have more confidence from this playbook, and about function that the playbook will be accessible to its target audience, and about the form, the chosen medium will be the best way forward to support caregivers. So we believe this is really important to test early, and then we move into the second round of testing with different assumptions. Let's move into the last tool in our prototyping toolkit: design a prototype. Once you identified what you want to learn, design low-resolution prototypes to test the assumptions you are making about your problem and your stakeholder. You can do so by creating an engaging experience for your user so you can get meaningful feedback. Before we implement an idea, we always test it through small tests, which we call prototypes, designed to test our assumptions about why the stakeholder will like the idea and why the idea is going to meet their needs. Select the assumptions you prioritize in the last activity and place them into this tool, and then design prototypes to test those assumptions. These prototypes should be small scale. They should involve a small number of stakeholders and require only a short amount of time both to prepare and to implement. Let's again look at our playbook idea example. So in this case, we took two assumptions that we want to test. The first assumption is what formats are going to be most accessible to different populations. We combine it with another assumption where we ask, do caregivers have capacity, time, capability, desire to use the playbook? So how are we going to create an engaging experience to test these assumptions? Well, we decided to create prototype 1. What we will do is to create a table of contents for the playbook and share via Zoom while recording their reactions. What are we trying to learn? Well, we are trying to learn if they are provided in a playbook, whether it's digital or physical format, if they are really helpful for the caregiver. And how will we make sense of what happened during the test? Well, because it's a Zoom call, we will record their reactions and see if they found it useful and understandable in this format. So that's our first idea of a prototype. But we don't stop there. We had another idea. There are other assumptions that we would like to test. So the next assumption is, what type of resources and advice will be the most helpful? We don't know. We want to learn. We also have another assumption where we are asking, what are the parts of the learning journey where parents and caregivers need the most support? In order to learn, we are going to develop prototype 2. What will we do? We'll create a YouTube promotional video for the playbook and share it via Zoom while recording their reactions. What are you trying to learn? We are trying to learn if the audience found the playbook idea helpful and if this advertising medium successfully delivered the value. And how will we make sense of what happened? We will see how many people watched the video and assess their reactions to the video. Before we wrap up, I just want to give you one more case study with a great example. This project that I'm bringing you focused on answering the question, how to best disperse technical agricultural information to local farmers. While creating solutions to get better technical information into the hands of rural farmers, the design team explored the use of video to convey agricultural information through the eyes of their peers. So rough cuts of videos were put on tablets to get early reactions from the farming community. This idea was developed based on two key insights. First, that farmers trust local expertise and experience. And second, they value peer learning, which means that the best agents to change are really other farmers. There were two specific assumptions or questions that the team wanted to explore. The first assumption, would these videos resonate with farmers and inspire them to seek agricultural training to better their own farms? And the second assumption, would a call center be an effective way of disbursing this technical information? In order to test these assumptions, the team developed two prototypes. First, a short video featuring a local farmer and his success in growing chicken. At the end of the screening, they gave a call center telephone number where farmers could reach out to an expert and ask questions. So without building actually a call center, the team tested this solution for a week by hiring an agricultural expert for just a week. The reality was that the videos were very successful, but the call center didn't work, and they learned it with very little investment, either from time and resources. In this phase, you learned about prototyping and how to create tangible versions of your solution. In the next lecture, we will be testing our prototypes to ensure that the solutions we are creating will meet the needs of those you intend to serve and actually solve the problems that matter the most to them. Thank you and see you in the next lecture.